Hey, what's up, everybody? We got a great show for you guys today. We're going to talk about the big win and where the Saints exist now after beating the Raiders. Can they make the playoffs? Is Andy Dalton the right choice? And what happened at the trade deadline? All of that and much more on today's episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast, which is coming to you from the Better Call Botto podcast studio. If you need legal help with any of the following car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime and Jones Act, hurricane, and storm claims, you better call Botto at 504-323-7777 or 985-303-7777. Just remember those sevens for your free consultation and case review. And as always, check out our friends at Firehouse Subs, Veteran Boulevard location. Great people do great things for the community. Check them out. When you're spending money there, they're probably putting it back into the community. So get a sandwich and they'll do something with the profits to help out the city of New Orleans. That is all we got for our ad reads today. Let's get into the show.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
As you can tell, last year it was an off year, but we reloaded and now it is our boss year. A Devo back there, and yeah, we got the badger. Don't forget my son, and don't forget the pass rush. James QB1 dropping down to MT. Ball handed off the Alvin with the quick feet. So when you see the Saints marching, yeah, we gon' trouble you at the Super Bowl party, eating on them double. We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing, and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing, and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
Yo, listeners, what's up? It is the NewOrleans.Football podcast. I'm Kevin Washington. I'm here with Mike Triplett. I'm here with Nick Underhill. And I'm here to give you guys some breaking news. We just traded a very sad potential last week podcast for a happy one this week because the Saints won. And it's way more fun to talk football when teams are winning. Fellas, what's up? Mike got a glow to him. Nick eyes look a little bit more blue, hair a little bit more blonde. What's up, fellas?
Hey, what's going on, man?
Oh, man, nothing much. Just glad to be here. We got a good pod for y'all today. As Nick said, we're going to get right into the topics. The Saints beat the Raiders this past Sunday, and they didn't just beat them. I would say they beat the hell out of them. They didn't even get on the scoreboard. So when you look at this win and you take a step back, how does this potentially, right? Because I don't think nothing is definitive yet, but when you look at the win that they had this past week, how they played on defense, some of the things you're starting to see on offense, some of the things that's starting to come together, does it change your outlook on the team in any way, shape, or form? Nick, why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, you don't want to draw too many conclusions off the first win in a while, but I think that for me, it puts them in a place where there's possibilities, and it allows me to take a step back and see the things that they're doing right. And I think we need to see everything more and more and more and more, and they got to keep proving it. But I will say this: as much as we've hammered the coaching on both sides of the ball, offensively, they've cleaned up their issues, and now there's a little bit of a track record. You aren't seeing the false starts. You aren't seeing the senseless turnovers. And now defensively, you're seeing better run fits. You aren't seeing busted coverages. You're seeing more organization, and that looks like improvement to me. Now, can they keep it up against the Ravens? Now, I think if there's anything wrong with their run
see the better
defense,
run fits.
and if there is anything wrong with their back end preventing big plays, those threads are going to get pulled and it's going to unravel a little bit. But I think that they are in a good place. We saw them make corrections. They seem to be playing spirited. They seem to be just scratching off all those things on the list, and you can see that now. If they had done those things and still lost the game, you aren't seeing that as clearly, but you can see the progress. And look, like I said, got to keep proving it. But I like what they did in this game a lot.
Well, I was a believer that they could clean up some of the biggest mistakes we kept seeing. I didn't believe that fumbles were going to be a season-long problem. I didn't really think false starts were going to be a season-long problem. I didn't even think missed tackles was going to be a season-long
They
problem.
still had that this week.
Especially when they get more of their healthy secondary together. And I had not, and I didn't think the team had given up on the coaching staff yet. But the one thing that did surprise me and make me a little more optimistic is I didn't know their ceiling was that high. I thought this team was capable of being slightly above 500. I thought they were capable of winning games like the Bengals game that they should have won if they hadn't blown it. I didn't know they were capable of looking this good this soon. I thought maybe they had this in them when they were healthy with Marshawn and Mike possibly back at some time down the road. But I was starting to worry. I think I said on this very podcast last week that if they do just survive for a little while and get over the hump, that I didn't know what the other side of the hump looked like. Are they a special team or not? This reminded you that there's special elements to this team. Now, I still think their most elusive commodity is going to be consistency. So I think we're going to see 2 good games and then 1 bad one, or 1 good game and then 2 bad ones. And I still think it's a very tall order to think that they can finish at 9-8, but they're in a division where 8-9 might win. So, so there is. It's not just a joke to say, hey, they could still make the playoffs. It's a realistic goal.
Yeah, I think tackling still is an issue though. Like they missed a lot of tackles this week. I think Alontae Taylor had like 5 himself. The difference is that when that was happening, they were getting better ball population and there was a swarming mentality. And that was something that they always did really well when they were a good defense. So when someone misses an open field tackle, Chris Harris is there, Pete Werner's there to clean it up. And that kind of makes it okay. You still need to make those first tackles, especially and if you're gonna miss, you can't whiff. And I thought that was still a big issue this week. It's something that they got to keep working on, but at least they have remedied some of the other things that were going wrong. So when there is one bad thing happening, it's not one thing leading into another. There's the fix right there. So if they can keep that stuff up, I think they'll be in decent shape this week against the Ravens.
My most pessimistic take, though, is they're never going to see a team play as bad as the Raiders did. And I can't remember the last time we saw any team play as bad as the Raiders did. That was pretty stunning. Like the Raiders didn't even put up a fight.
We've seen DA take apart offenses before, though. Like that is something that he does, and that's he did it to the Tampa Bay over and over. I mean, so that is something that he's supposed to be able to do. He is one of the best defensive minds in the NFL. I think we saw that this week. Whatever they did behind the scenes during the 10-day break, it worked really well. Now they just got to build on that momentum.
So when you look at this game, and you saw how well they played, and maybe this is, I don't want to say it's the new norm, but I think it can potentially alter how you feel about the team. So what would it take for you to look at this team and say, and we can start with you, Mike. All right, I think they've turned it around. Like, what do you need to see? You need to see it against the Ravens. You need to see it for a couple of weeks. Are you ruined for the rest of the season and you don't trust them? Like, right? Are you too scarred? So, like, what would it take for you to say, okay, this team, they started off bad, they got off on the wrong foot. Maybe the training camp wasn't run the way, it wasn't as competitive as it should have been. Some guys were a little lax. Sean Payton was there. There's a bunch of different things that a bunch of reasons that we can point to. But at what point? And how many games do they need to win? And every game is not going to be like this, but what do you need to see from this team to say, okay, I think they figured it out. They didn't get off to the start they wanted, but they're circling the wagons a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I watch them win 3 out of 4 games, then if there's a 4-game stretch where they win 3 out of the 4, then I'm probably going to feel a lot differently. Even if we see them beat Baltimore, I'll feel a lot better about them, but that would be 2 straight home games. But like we've always said, we expect, especially when Marshawn Lattimore comes back, and then it would help, obviously, to get some of the receivers back. But I think the offense has been doing pretty well. But I think we still expect their best football in the second half of the season as opposed to the first half of the season. So, I mean, if this team is ever 500 at any point, then all of a sudden we'll be, I think, assuming that it'll be a disappointment if they don't make the playoffs. If they manage to get back to 500 at some point before the end of before week 18.
I feel like if they ever win 2 games in a row, it's going to feel like a disappointment if they don't win the division.
So for you, Nick, how they did this without Mike Thomas, they did this without Jarvis Landry, they did this without Marshawn Lattimore, who I can make an easy case that I think he's the most important player on that defense, just for what they do schematically and how they want to do it. They didn't have Troutman. I don't think he's just a big pass catcher, but I do think he's important to, how they run the ball and some of the things that they do and some of the formations they run. So, like, how impressive was this game? The fact that they dominated a team who arrows pointed up, by the way. This is not their record is not great, but they've been playing better, in recent weeks. How impressive of a win was this, all things considered, without those guys being on the field?
Yeah, it's a pretty impressive win, no question. I mean, you talk about the trade deadline, they didn't do anything today, and it kind of feels like they're still going to have this injection of talent at some point. Jarvis Landry is going to be a significant addition to this team if he can have some momentum. It's a little bit surprising how long he's been
Yeah.
out of action, but there is a lot of talent on the shelf, and I do think even if they had lost this game, if there was a mentality, and I know there was this mentality in the building of just kind of holding tight and waiting for the cavalry to come and try to win a poor division and maybe get rolling at the end of the season, there is a logical basis to that where it's not outrageous to think that things could break for them, and at the end of the season they might be peaking, and maybe you win a game in the playoffs. It's also extremely possible that everything unravels this week and they're back in the basement, and we're wondering how they can keep the Eagles from getting the top 5 pick and all that stuff. But I do think that there is a lot of talent on the shelf, and it's logical. It's not an excuse. It's not making a pass for the defense or the offensive stuff that's happened this year. Like, Mike Thomas is a really good player. Marshawn Lattimore is a really good player. There's a reason both those guys were paid a lot of money. The team's identity on both sides of the ball for a while was built around each one of those guys. To have both of them on the injured list is a big deal. When they come back, it is going to be a significant addition to this team.
And I agree with
It's like
Kevin
$40 million of salary cap space. It's just
Well,
not
look,
on
if
the
we had
field.
did you guys do a top 20 this offseason? Well,
Yeah, we
I
always do a
guess
top
it's tough to
25.
say
Yeah,
with Mike Thomas right now because he was probably lower on that list after missing so much time. But I mean, when Mike Thomas is back and healthy, I mean, those could have been ranked as the 2 of the top 3 players
No
on the team
question.
based on
Yeah.
talent alone.
After the first game, we thought Mike was looking like he found
Yeah.
his mojo back.
But
Yeah,
I agree with you
absolutely.
on Marshawn being the most important because not only is he an extremely talented player who plays an extremely important position, but the drop off from him versus wins above replacement value or whatever, getting him on the field and getting someone like Justin Evans off the field who's been struggling, is the greatest difference. The reason we're not ranking Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry that way is because their pass catchers and their offense has been doing okay with them. The secondary needs reinforcements. It made a big difference already getting Alontae Taylor back 2 weeks ago, False Nadivo
Yeah.
back this last week, and even PJ Williams back this week. I think will be a nice boon for that secondary. Even though I bet Chris Harris stays in the slot because you did the film study. You can tell me if you agree with me, but I think he's settled. I mean, if that's all he's doing is working the slot, he's settled in a little bit better.
In the right matchup, he can be okay in
Yeah.
there. In the wrong matchup, I think
Yeah,
he's an
yeah.
extreme liability in there. All right, hold up. Give me your top 3 of the 2022 season since we're talking about rankings, Kevin.
Oh man, top 3. No specific order. Pete Werner.
I mean, specific order.
Oh man, Pete Werner. I guess Marshawn over than the one game against Minnesota. Alvin Kamara.
All right, that's your
I
top 3.
think I think off the top of my head, I think that may be the only 3 guys who've consistently played well
Give me
that
your
I
top
can
3.
think of.
Well, Olave's a contender too. If we're looking
I
for people who
forgot
consistently play
Olave.
well.
I forgot Olave.
And I mean, Cam Jordan's a candidate. He's up to 5 sacks now. But if we're going like some sort of 2022 MVP ranking, it's Kamara and Werner are definitely on my list, and
Yeah.
Ramchek's threw his hat in the ring this week because he's so important. But I'll go Kamara, Werner. I'll go Cam Jordan slightly over Olave so far. Full body of work. Marshawn's Marshawn would be my number 1. He just hasn't played enough.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You can't duck this question.
Yeah, I'm
I'd
like,
probably,
what the
I'd
hell
probably,
is
I'd probably,
that?
I'd probably go
Yeah.
Marshawn. And
Yeah.
I think I see the value of Marshawn even
More
more
when
in the
he's absent.
absence.
That's a
Yeah.
fair.
And
Yeah,
I'm saying that
yeah.
coming off a game where they played well. Like I still think they missed him a lot in this game. So I would go him. I would go Pete Werner, and then I'd go Alvin. And
Yeah.
the only reason I got Werner above Alvin is just because they held him out of the end zone for so long. So like you're doing a coin flip here, and I think the defense has needed his body of work to kind of keep them in the position that they're in. So yeah, that would be my top 3 so far.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You sold
they
me on the
don't win
Marshawn
games
argument.
without Alvin Kamara. Like they
Yeah.
just the wins don't exist
Yeah.
when for yeah. So I think Kamara is like probably my number 1 because I don't think they can win without him right
Well,
there. It
and
almost feels like
here's
And I
the-
got Taysom would be my number 4. Taysom
Oh,
would be
yeah,
my
we
number 4
probably-
yeah,
guy.
Taysom is in there too.
We probably-
Olave Taysom would round the top 5 in my opinion.
Yeah.
from
Well,
my-
and
from my
here's the
team,
thing
yeah.
about Kamara is we probably don't need to bother having an Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston debate for the 8th time this week. But I'll defer to Greg Rosenthal from NFL.com who made this point. He said, and I don't know if it's as clean as this, but he said the Saints stuck with Andy Dalton because he gets the ball to Alvin Kamara. Well, I mean, a strong case could be made.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a way of simplifying it, but the offense should run through Alvin, and they picked a quarterback who runs the offense through Alvin.
We've been making that same point
Yeah.
the whole season.
Yeah,
The
I
offense
know.
should run
Yeah.
off of him. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I
I
mean, it
mean-
is that simple. It is kind of
Yeah.
that simple. Let me throw a guy in that's in my top 10 somewhere. I don't know where. Cesar Ruiz.
Yeah.
Like Cesar is in the top 10
Man.
players of this
Yeah.
season right now,
Yeah.
and that is maybe the best
Probably.
development of the whole entire season so far. Just long term, I think that was really important because they don't
Yeah.
need to go into the offseason with somewhere they drafted a first round pick is a need. So I mean that's huge.
That's a good point. That's a good. I think this game probably is the best I've ever seen him play in the NFL.
I don't know, man. I feel like he's had better ones this year. Like he's just been that solid, and I thought his game was outstanding this week.
It felt like it just all came together. But I guess it's the fact of the matter is, if you'd have told me, 3 months ago that we'd be arguing over what was Cesar Ruiz's best game, then I would think that the Saints would probably say, hey, you know what, that's a situation that I'm willing to buy. So one thing I want to circle back to, because Mike, you mentioned ceiling a few minutes ago, and I want both of you guys to tackle this one. Before the season, what was your ceiling for this team? And after this past week, and listen, the first other 7 weeks they have to come into play neither, right? The Raider game is not the only game this season. I did tweet out that the Saints defense had a 10-game preseason during the game because, but yeah, but what's your perceived ceiling of the team now juxtaposed against what it was? And maybe not juxtaposed, maybe just, compared to what it was earlier in the year. Is there any difference? Is it the same or is it lower, higher?
It had lowered significantly before this past week. I had sort of my most pessimistic take on the Saints was that they didn't have the ceiling I thought they did. I thought they could I thought they could be competitive. I mean, 29 out of 32 teams in the NFL feel like they could all take turns beating each other outside of like 2 or 3 actual good teams. And I thought, the Saints have enough stars and enough competence that they could win on any given day. They should have beat the Bengals. Their other 2 wins came against teams leading divisions right now, Seattle and Atlanta. So I thought they could mess around and be above 500 when they played well. This is the first time that I thought maybe they can be special. The defense had to be elite for them to be a team that could really do damage in the playoffs. And I'm worried the defense isn't going to be elite consistently this year. But the offense, I thought they could be slightly above average, and I'm pretty confident they can be maybe even more than slightly above average when they're fully healthy. So, I mean, it's a team that if they got to start over right now, I would probably pick a 10-7 record, but wouldn't be shot. Like if week 1 was this week, if that really was a 10-week preseason, I'd probably be back to predicting this team to be a 10-7 team, which is what I picked them at the beginning of the year.
Speaking of ceilings, if you are not signed up to NewOrleans.Football, make sure you do that. NewOrleans.Football/subscribe. That is the best way to help us out. You get an extra podcast every week on there, all of our analysis and everything else. As far as 10-7 is a little high for me. I think I would probably drop a win. The one thing that kind of worries me about them going forward is that there is the 1 or 2 Andy Dalton turnover worthy plays every single week. And I feel like they've gotten extremely lucky with those so far. At some point, that's going to turn on them. And at some point, it is going to cost them a game. When it does cost them a game, I don't think that it should be something where they say, we got to change quarterbacks. I don't think the leash should be that short. I think that the point you made earlier, getting the ball to Alvin, all the stuff they do on offense, I think that they need to just kind of settle in around that identity. And if there's maybe 2 of those games in a row or something like that, then you start looking at it. But I think they should feel safe there. But I do think kind of how they're built, we've seen the underbelly a little bit. I think that as good as we feel about everything going right this week, I feel like at some point down the road, there's going to be another
Yeah,
game where
without question.
Twitter's going to be screaming and have their pitchforks out, and it'll be too soon to make any decisions then. But it is going to be those ups and downs, I think, until this team fully forms into like an identity. And the one thing I feel bad about DA for is a coach. Like, granted, he had a run at this before, but other coaches, so like he had the overcorrection. Like Kat Terrell wrote a story this week, and she got people from the Raiders who said DA was too hands-on in Oakland with the players, and they felt like he micromanaged too much. And I think our biggest criticism right now is that it's been a little too loose. So you find out it's too loose,
Overcorrected.
yeah, and you settle back into a point where there's a meeting in the middle of it. Usually, when you take over a team, that team sucks, and they're going to lose a lot of games, and nobody's really looking at the coach like 7 games into the tenure about like what's going right, what's going wrong. This is a team that came in with Peter King putting them in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And
I never had those aspirations for this team.
but I mean, I
Yeah.
think I don't think that he's been able to make his adjustments kind of in the, the little bit of silence, a little bit of comfort that some other guys get. Now, if you hit the ground rolling like they are in New York, that's great. And you have it all kind of figured out until you don't, because at some point there is going to be a bump in the road. But it is a tough situation for him. And I'm not making, excuses. He doesn't deserve any of that. He's blessed to come into a situation with talent and expectations and all that. But I do think that it does put a spotlight on any, learning curve that they're going through. And there's not the same patience for injuries and all this stuff. So I think it is in its own way a tough situation, even though it's probably one of the better situations that anybody was hired into this year. But yeah, I mean, I think overall expectations, I'd say about 9 wins right now. I think if you were starting the season over.
Well, and here's the thing is I think you were more bullish on the team than I was even throughout this. So I must have misspoke by saying 10-7. But
I was at 10-7.
What I could no, but I'm saying like even of what their ceiling was. You kept saying you thought they could be.
I thought they were 10-7.
Be better than what they had.
I thought there was a 10-7 with the 2-game variance either which way.
Right. But the thing I think I couldn't get out of my head is if they just got to play the same teams that they lost to over again, then business losing to Carolina, and really should have beat Minnesota and Cincinnati too.
Yeah.
And really
And
Arizona kind of looks like a hot mess too. So I guess when I said if you start the season over and you play anywhere close to as good as they did the other day, there's not a team that they've played yet that they shouldn't have beaten.
Yeah, look,
Yeah,
if
they lost.
what would have happened if they went away from Dalton? After Jameis got hurt in the first game, if they made that change right then, like how does you could pick up another win somewhere, and then the outlook's completely different right now. I mean, it's just if they were a 500 team right now, I think the feeling about them will be completely different because the whole freaking league is 500 right now.
So they're a field goal. They're a field goal in across the Atlantic, away from basically, the optimism.
Cincinnati's the one. Look, Carolina, they had no business losing to that team, but they were playing without Alvin again, talking about how important he was, and they could only score 7 points in that game. But Cincinnati's the one they let get away. If they fall 1 game short of their goal, being up 9 points in that game and not being able to close the deal is the one that's hurt. Is the one that sticks with me the most so far.
Yeah. I will say I'm disappointed in you guys. We was talking about ceilings, and there was I gave you guys an opportunity to make a no ceilings reference. Nick, I'm really disappointed in you. That was
they got a ceiling.
There
is no. We aren't making any no ceilings references.
No, I said no.
There is a definite ceiling on this team.
No, I mean, we got to get DG a chair. I'll say this: my ceiling on the team is the number 5 ranked offense and the number 10 ranked defense. Because that's what they are right now, which is wild.
Ranked
to
number
say.
10 in any category.
I don't look at yards. I don't look at you can't look at
right.
It's points.
Right. It doesn't mean anything.
They say total defense and that they tell the yardage, but not the points. Come on, no, it's the point. The points are what matter.
Yeah. It's a totally wild stat. I looked at it and I was like, yeah, this ain't the number 10 defense right now.
No, it is not.
And offense is like, again, number 5 total yards. This is a little tricky. I mean, if you're losing, then you're trying to throw the play catch up, and there's a lot that goes into it. But it's interesting. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's a metric that is used, and they're considered the number 5 ranked offense right now.
They're just lucky they didn't have to play defense on those pick sixes and stuff like that. So Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to think about it. That's one way to think about it.
Fumbling short field. Yeah. All that stuff.
Yeah, just pick something that can go wrong, and it will go wrong. But I will say that just my short take on it. I think the ceiling. I think it's in motion right now. That's a total cop out right now. But I think that if the defense didn't necessarily become significantly less talented than they were last year, I think with the loss of some of the safeties, I think you can make a case that they're not as good there. But if the defense remembers who they were, and I think it's possible that they do, I think it's possible that they don't. That's why I said it's in motion. But if the defense gets back to where they were last year, the offense is a clear step above where they were. And I think that's, at least to me, I think it's, is kind of obvious, right? And if they can, continue to just play how they're playing now and protect the ball, I think this is a team that I would not like to see if I had to play them, because I think they can, if they playing like their defense played last year, with even no offense, they could beat any team on any given Sunday. You get Mike back, Jarvis gets into a flow of things, and they don't turn the ball over, which they may have remedied. We'll see going in the coming weeks. And yeah, it's a team that I think if they can sneak into, the playoffs, I'm not saying they're going to win a Super Bowl or nothing like that, but it's just one of those things where you just kind of like, I'd just rather not play them, because they can beat any given team on any given week, right? But on the flip side, they can lose to any team on any given week. So it's just one of those teams where it's like, oh man, you kind of struggle to play teams like that. One of the storylines from this week, and both of you guys were, you spoke about it, tweeted about it, reported about it, and you guys exhausted the point was, Kamara kind of stepped up to the plate and was like, hey man, we got to get our swag back, right? And that was the word. If I hear swag again, I'm gonna lose my mind. I've heard that word so much this week.
Yeah.
I don't like the word no more. I'll be honest with you. We got to come up with a newer word for swag, right? I think that started with the T.I. song for a few years back.
It's like a 2011 word.
Yeah, it's so old, man. Like, what about drip, right? I don't know. You got to find a new word.
How about confidence?
Let's use confidence. Use confidence. That's a little bit of a corporate word, but that's okay. We're a corporate company, so let's use confidence. But it kind of hit me. I was like, and I think it was the case before, but I think it can continue to be this even more. This is Alvin Kamara's team, right? They don't win without him. He's the most important player on the team. I think guys will follow him if he says something, just because if he don't say a lot, and when he do say something, it's like, okay, Alvin's talking. Like, just your guys' take on it. Like, most teams you look at them as the quarterback is the leader, especially for veteran team. You got DeMario Davis, Cam Jordan, but right now, if you ask me whose team it is, I would probably say Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, no question. Mike talked to him this week, and yeah, he just said he stepped up into that void that Breeze kind of left. Yeah, I think he's put the team on his back.
What's really interesting from the reporting this week is, I mean, that we could have talked about that possibly being true before the season started, but I think it's clear that that's a role that Alvin is currently taking on for the first time. Like, he's been a energy leader, I think, and leader by example, leader by the team has confidence because
swag leader, Mike. He's the leader in swag.
Team swag leader.
Right?
But not only did he say, when I talked to him, that he realized that he needed to fill some of that void. There's no Drew Brees, there's no Teron Armstead. Michael Thomas hasn't been around because of the injuries. Dennis Allen said very clearly, like, he's taking on more of that role this year. And I'm trying to think of who we just talked to yesterday. I'm already forgetting. Who did we talk to on the offensive side of the ball yesterday? Ramczyk said.
Ramczyk, yeah, I heard
used
Ramczyk
to be a little quieter, and this year he's taken on more of that and speaking up more. So I think Alvin realized he needed to be that.
Yeah, look, it was a story during camp. Like, DA was talking about him being someone who was setting the tone in practices and doing things that kind of, I think he felt like he was helping him establish culture and everything. And Alvin was voted a team captain. And I even talked to him about his bigger leadership role before week 1. And I wrote a story about it on the site. And even at that point, he said, I talk when I need to talk, but I kind of, lead by example. And Cam Jordan, in the same story, I quoted him. He said, Alvin's Alvin. He just does what he does, and he doesn't change for anybody. And that's why we love him. But Alvin has changed, and he felt the void watching those false starts, as he told you, and just getting frustrated with it and needing to speak up. So I think that I think Alvin's probably the smartest player that ever covered, 10 years in the league. I think he just has an intuitiveness to him, and he's highly intelligent. He understands situations and how to move differently and when different things happen. And I think we're seeing that right now. Him very clearly seeing that void and saying, you know what? Who's going to fill this? It isn't going to be Chris Olave because he's a rookie. It isn't going to be James Hurst. It's got to be me. So I think he stepped into that, and I think that's a huge reason for if they do have this turnaround. I think it'll be a huge reason for it.
And he
Yeah, he'd be
said,
a
"Look, I did a story on his intelligence. Sean Payton has made the same statement. He always puts him right next to Marshall Faulk as the two most intelligent guys he's ever covered." And Alvin said he very deliberately tried to learn from Drew Brees and would like study him in practice and talk to him after practice about, why were you doing this and what were you thinking? Like he wants to see the game like Drew Brees. He said, so that's a big part of his game he's tried to develop throughout his career too.
Yeah, I mean, I remember gosh, the years flow together at this point, but it was last year, the year before, he was telling Sean about what he was seeing out there and what play to call and what
Oh yeah,
how they was going to respond to what his split was, et cetera. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, this is a running back. I think it kind of flows with what you were saying about how smart he is as a player. One thing, here's my favorite. I think the biggest thing about this game with against the Raiders with the Saints, and I think the biggest reason for their number 5, quote unquote, offensive ranking at this point. I think the play of the offensive line has been as good as it's been probably for a while, right? And I'm not saying years, but last year there was times they were struggling. Early this year there were times where they were struggling. I don't know if Andy Dalton needs to wash his jersey after this game. I mean, maybe he got a little bit red hair on there or something,
Two
but other than
pressures,
that,
2 pressures the whole game, 2 pressures.
that's
They've
it.
been
Chandler
incredible.
Jones and one other guy. Yeah, so just talk about that and talk about what it means for this team and how important it is for them going forward. Because I think if the offensive line plays like that, then yeah, you get to be a number 5 offense. Every offense will be a number 5 offense with that type of offensive line play.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that go into it, and I don't want to simplify it to any one thing. I think that all those guys are playing better. I think that they've gotten some time together, and there's more chemistry. I think that they've done a better job of setting the protections. There's also an element of I think Dalton has done a good job of settling that a little bit. Just he's 35 years old. He's been in the league for a
yeah.
while. He sees some different things, so I think he's made some adjustments. I think the ball comes out a little bit quicker, and that's not just in general. Like people like to look at time to throw and they boil it down and they're like, well, it's this and this. Like situationally, there's
Yeah.
different types of
Know when you have time to throw, and when
yes,
you don't.
yes, and I think he's done a very good job of recognizing that. Look, on one of those angle routes, Alvin, like on both of them, on the 2 plays Alvin scored on, Dalton just read the field so quickly. On one of them, he saw Jawan Johnson kind of took a guy out, and it opened up the angle route over the middle, balls out immediately. And then on the other one, there was a blitz coming. He noticed the vacated space. He puts the ball in the vacated space. Alvin's right there, and off he goes. Like I think it's things like that that you're just stopping pressure before it can ever occur. That helps the offensive line. And it was the same factor with Breeze. Breeze got the ball out so quick and he saw everything. And he was just so smart and so sharp about what he did. I think he made an offensive line that might look top 10, 11, 12 in a different circumstance, number 1 by a mile. And I think Dalton's kind of doing a little bit of the same thing. I'm not making a Dalton to Breeze comparison
Right.
at all, but I just think that, in some of that rhythm, 10 quick passes to Alvin, that's 10 plays that you aren't going to get pressured on.
Well, right, and the what's fair to make a Dalton to Breeze comparison is this offense has a philosophy that, Pete Carmichael's really good at his job, and Sean Payton's really good at his job, and a lot of times they design plays that you're supposed to look at the defense and see what defense they're in and know where to go with the ball. It's not about, all right, look at every receiver and then decide which one I want to throw to. It's like, oh, we designed this play and we talked about it in practice that it's going to get us 8 yards. And so if they're in this defense, then throw that pass. I mean, it's obviously when we compared Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton. Now, the difference is Andy Dalton threw like 1 pass more than 10 yards the entire game, and Jameis Winston will make bigger plays. These are the trade-offs, but there's no question that this offense, the way it's currently designed right now, it finds a rhythm when it operates this way. And then obviously, if you're talking about the offensive line, you got to throw in. I don't know where they rank. I didn't check after this week's game, but I think over the last 4-week span, dating back to London, they're like top 3 in rushing yards per game as well.
Yep.
They've been outstanding running the ball, and like Taysom Hill appears to be doing a lot of that stuff by himself when he gains 7 yards every time he runs, but the offensive line is obviously
No, when
part of
blocking
that.
well.
when you're breaking that stuff down, man, the guards are down the field. They're leading the way on a lot of them. Eric McCoy's doing a lot. I think Ramchek's moving a little bit better than he has recently.
Yes.
James Hurst has been solid. Like I think all those guys are doing a really good job. And going back to Caesar, like there's just a lot of plays where he's in the second level, he's hitting somebody and then getting out down the field. It's just a big difference for him. And I think when he's playing that well, like it just helps everybody else play better. And I think that was the difference between them maybe being a good offensive line and us talking about them in terms of being great. And they built that line in that fashion to have guys on the inside that are really fast because they like to pull them and they like for him to get down the field. And when his athleticism allows him to do that, as opposed to kind of being stationary and not doing the right things, I think it makes a major, major difference.
Andrews Pete came back in this game too and just quietly goes about doing his job. He used to be the number one punching bag on the whole team before Cesar Ruiz came along and became the number one punching bag
man.
on the whole team. And
It was a
and
good
now-
week for the
and
guys
now
that they like to beat up on.
Oh,
Peyton
yeah.
Turner.
Peyton Turner, yeah, Andrew, yeah, that's funny. Yeah, Andrews Pete made people. I mean, Cesar Ruiz made people love Andrews Pete, and then Cesar Ruiz made people love Cesar Ruiz. So, what a world we living in, man. Yeah, I just think that whenever this offense has been good / dominant, the offensive line has been good, and I think that in this system, if you got a good offensive line, then I think you're probably going to start to see some good
Man,
results.
that's
So,
every team in the league, though. You see Cincinnati struggling because they can't block. I mean, it's just you
Yeah,
gotta
it's
you gotta
just-
you gotta be able to block to be able to move the ball.
yeah, it's definitely it's definitely foundational. Unless you got a guy that can, run around and avoid free rushers and, throw the ball behind their back like Patrick Mahomes, you're definitely gonna have to you're gonna need some guys up front that can protect. So another thing today was the trade deadline. The Saints didn't make any moves. Like, what does that say anything? Was it just, do you guys think they should maybe have added a running back? Do you think they should have stayed put? Do you think they should have offloaded some assets if maybe start a mini rebuild? Like, just, what's your take on them kind of standing pat during the trade deadline and saying, hey, all right, these are the guys we're gonna run with for the rest of the season and see how things go.
Well, they followed my advice, which was to do neither. when the question last week was, should they be buyers or sellers? Nick made a really good point, though, about the running back position, especially if they had decided to acquire somebody who could be a part of the future. That's a position where now they obviously, no matter how you feel about Mark Ingram, they obviously need another backup now because Mark Ingram's going to probably miss the next month with a knee injury. But they are obviously going to have to get younger at that position in the future. So it's going to be a huge priority in the offseason. But I didn't want to see them give up any significant assets. They've already put enough future assets into this season. And I get it. They have a chance to compete for the division title. And that's why they weren't sellers. They're not giving up on this season. But they've given up enough future assets already. They're going to try to do it with what they have.
Yeah, I never got the sense that they were seriously going to trade anyone. I was, kind of pretty strongly told they weren't looking to make any of those moves or anything
Even
like that.
before the Minnesota game, you were told that.
Yeah. So
Minnesota game. Even before the Las Vegas
yeah,
game. So
before it wasn't
just
dependent on
reacting to that.
yeah, it wasn't
performance.
dependent on win or loss. Like they thought they could win the division regardless of what happened there. The one thing, and I'm not ready to get into like a full scale breakdown of this, but I have started kind of doing some of my work on next year's cap, and I kind of see a situation where they kind of gotta hold the fort a little bit next year. I don't really think that there's this escape pod that everybody thinks there is. If there is, they need to start making moves in like December where they're restructuring contracts so that they can essentially cut people in December to move money around. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to do a lot of that stuff. So I think that really they kind of got to hold the fort, and it's not just for this year. Next year, I think they're in the situation then if they want to start over, I think it's the year after that where they really have the leeway to do that. So but based on where they're at, and for me, seeing a win kind of changes how I looked at things. I think they're in a situation where it feels a little more tenable than it did before to have success, to make the playoffs, to do all the things we were talking about earlier, maybe catching a run like Cincinnati did last year, late in the year. Now, I'm not saying Super Bowl, but they could get hot and be a legitimate team in the playoffs and maybe not get blown out, maybe win a game before losing or something like that. So I think there's enough talent there for them to just try to get into the playoffs. And I still think there's enough talent there for them next year with a couple of additions. I think they could still be a good team next year too.
Quarterback will
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
We will talk about quarterback for roughly 800 hours.
I think they can be competitive
Yeah.
with Andy Dalton. Like I kind of feel like if you keep putting pieces around him and you keep doing that, and then maybe you recruit a quarterback from somewhere else at some point, even if they are stuck, like I still think that they can be, if they ran this, if we went straight to next year and they just added a couple guys, another running back, roster's essentially the same. Maybe they get an interior defensive lineman and you drop Andy Dalton back there. I'm probably still saying like a nine win team, throughout the
What'll be
offseason.
really interesting is I said this about Jameis Winston last week, that I think if they ever start looking toward the future, if they don't think the playoffs are going to work out this year, they need to see what they have in Jameis Winston, because he's the one who's under contract next year. But really, that could be what they're doing with Andy Dalton the rest of this year too, because I do agree with you that their starting quarterback next year is not going to be a rookie. I don't think. I mean, maybe there's a scenario where they trade Sean Payton and they move up and they get a guy they like and he's ready to start right away. That's kind of hard to envision with no first round pick.
Well, leave us or nothing.
What's that?
Leave us or nothing.
Yeah, that's your guy.
That's my guy.
But even if they're drafting a quarterback 15th or later, they are probably going to have a veteran penciled in as a starter until that guy, the Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett plan, the Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ritter plan. And I think there's going to be a lot of guys like that available in the league next year that get dropped from other teams. But I think Andy Dalton is probably trying to secure that he's that guy next year, whether he's the starter written in ink or the starter while they're developing someone behind him.
Everybody in the comments is going to say, "Oh, he sucks. He's struggling. Leave us. He's had some bad. Yeah, okay. He's had a couple bad games. He's hurt. He lost his OC. It's like Taysom Hill with a cannon. Like I would love to watch that for the next 15 years.
Yeah, Will Levis. I mean, you just dripping with talent.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Coach it up.
He's gonna be way too high. He's gonna be way too high in the draft.
Yeah, he's not going to be there. Yeah, Saints are not. Yeah, unless
he's like
they
a top 5 pick. Yeah.
Yeah, they trick the Eagles and give them that pick back and tank for the rest of the season at best, right?
I'll tell you what, we're talking about outlook for the rest of the season. Playoffs is the most important goal, but right below it is get to at least the 15th pick or later in the draft.
You got to.
Like,
yeah.
Like,
I said
people
13.
Aren't being like, the Eagles have the what pick? Oh.
No, 13, man. You got. I say just don't give Philly a top 12 pick.
All right,
Trevor. Yeah, Trevor Penning at 13 feels fine. I mean, it does. It's kind of, you gotta like, okay, 13, sure.
Yeah, that's real. But if you're in the top 5 and you need a quarterback, like, oh man, that's yeah. All right, this is a happy pod, right? All right, so let's talk a little bit about the defense. And, it's just a few things I want to run through here. I got a lot of things written down, but I think the thing about this game that started, when I look at the defense and I think, okay, what makes this defense good? I've always said it. DA said it this week, so it made me feel like I guessed correctly. But the D-line plays well. When the D-line plays well, everything on defense looks different. I remember last year where, Cam Jordan got off to a slow start. Marcus Davenport, became available, and then he started to play well. And Cam Jordan, his play just magically became, significantly better. And, this game you saw plays. Onyemata, he woke up. I think Bobby Hebert had a funny thing on. I think he was talking to Coach Nielsen. They said he was in witness protection or something, and he came out. I thought that was hilarious. Bobby's just funny to listen to, man. Shout out to Bobby. He just kind of moved on to the next point, but he played the politics. But he showed up. Davenport decided that Devontae Adams was a baby and just picked him up and just said, I don't want you over there. Cam Jordan played well. Peyton Turner, I was just glad to see him do well, because he's just had the fans have been really tough on Peyton Turner, man. So it's good to see him play well. But I thought the D-line, when they're playing like that, they stop the run, which is just that's not exclusive to the D-line. But I just thought when those guys play like that, I think the rest of the defense is typically going to fall in line. And I think they're going to need those guys to play well for the rest of the season, because that's the only way the defense can sustain this level of play.
Yeah, I thought they had their best game of the season, but I've never agreed with the talking point that the pass rush hasn't been good. Like, I just don't buy it. I don't think it's factually true. I think they've been getting pressure the whole season. It's
in
just
the games that they haven't,
or understandable.
there were situational reasons for not.
I think that was just a really reactionary thing. Look, I mean, like, I know coming into this game that JT Gray, I believe, was third on the team in sacks. So I mean, that does say something, but like it's still been effective. And I think if you're
His
really
PFF pass rush grade is so high.
if you really break down the games, like you see the guys swarming and they're around and they're getting pressure, they're affecting plays. So I haven't bought into the just the panic over that group. But yeah, again, obviously by far their best game. And the one thing that they're doing, so they're still not blitzing much, and they aren't running a lot of stunts up front. There was a little bit more of that this week, the stunts, but they didn't blitz a whole lot. What they are kind of doing is just 3-man front, and they're bringing a fourth guy from various places. And I thought Derek Carr was kind of confused by it a little bit. Their offensive line was having trouble with it. You get Pete Werner catching a double, and it'd free up a defensive lineman. So they did a really good job, I think, of attacking them in a specific manner that allowed these guys to get free and make a lot of plays. But also, they were winning their one-on-ones, which is really important. Onyemata was kind of bullying people a little bit. I thought Peyton Turner just worked hard the whole game. Like, he was just going and going and going and going. And I thought it was a good step forward for him. See how he does moving forward out of this game. But you got to feel good about everything that happened on the front
It's funny
this game.
you said also they were winning their one-on-ones. I thought you were going to stop at also they were winning. Like, people will feel a lot better about the pass rush if they get to just tee off on a team like that became one-dimensional,
Yeah.
like the Raiders did, and that's what the Saints have been doing for years. Is
Yes, that
stop
was
at the
the
run.
key.
You can't run against us. All you can do is throw against us,
key.
and then they, and then they get their 4 or 5 sacks against a team that can only throw against them. So, game script obviously made us feel even better about the pass rush, but I agree. We've been more concerned about the interior defensive line, both against the run and pass rush. So I don't know if this signals that Onyemata is back. Peyton Turner, both of his came in the fourth quarter. Dennis Allen was pretty. He wasn't overly kind to Peyton Turner. He was like he was saying that was his best game yet. And he goes, but with that guy, it's like a guy that you see flash every once in a while. And he makes the splash plays once in a while, but
Need
what's
to
he
see it
doing on all the other
consistently.
plays? Like, he was making it clear that they need to see this more consistently from Peyton Turner if he's going to get on the field. But it was obviously a really promising development. But also the other thing, it's such a trope, but how it works hand in hand with the secondary. If you trust your secondary, you're more aggressive up front. If your secondary is making a guy hold the ball, you can get there up front. So if the secondary is going to improve, then I think the pass rush will. I think people will realize the pass rush is special again.
Well,
But I
DA
thought-
said that. Oh yeah, DA said that pass is his biggest indicator of team defense, right? The front has to trust the back end, and the back end has to trust that the guys are going to get pressure. So I think he goes to the point you was making, right? Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, no, he did too. He was higher on Peyton Turner in this game than he was after the Carolina one last year, though. When everybody was high on him and he had the splash plays, he was kind of like poo-pooed all the stuff everybody was saying. And he said in this one, like between the moments, like he was still seeing good things. So a good step forward for him. They need him to be good. Obviously, he might have located the path somewhere in the woods, but he's still deep in the woods as far as where he's at in his development. But I mean, at least he can maybe come out of the brush a little bit in this one.
Just to be clear, DA was not saying this was one of those games where he only made splash.
No, he's saying he looked good
that's what
between
it was
them.
in the past.
Yeah.
And this time he put a complete game together.
Well, DA pulled out the old Sean Payton quote that confidence is born from demonstrated ability. So I was waiting on that. So he pulled that out during the presser, and I was like, all right,
Parcells quote. The Parcells quote.
Oh, my bad. So this is like he's like the grandson of the quote, right? Sean's daddy and Parcells is the grandpa. But yeah, no, Turner had a good game. Like Nick said, he kept going and going and going. I just want to holler at Energizer and let him know your ad can be right here on my wall. I'm available. Just call me. Don't call Nick. Just come straight to me. I got this. Nick, Mike, I thought you did just real quick. I thought you made a good point about the run defense. I think that every game, for the most part, every time you see the Saints defense dominate, they don't get run on, and they just tee off against teams that are passing the ball on. I mean, the Bucs will just give up on the run at times against the Saints, and so I think that's the key for their defense, like stopping the run. That's old school because a lot of defensive coordinators don't believe in that, stopping the run first, but the Saints do, and I think it's shown to be successful for them. So Alontae Taylor, and I feel like this is there's so many things to talk about this game. This is Alontae Taylor. His play was such a big one. I feel like we're just getting into it, 50 minutes into the pod. There's so many talking points. But yeah, just, Nick, I know you have some. You watched the film study. You have some thoughts on him, and so what did you see from him? And Da also said, he felt like Paulson Debo just kind of like his first time this year, getting healthy. And so, what did you see from those guys out there at corner? And what do you expect from them going forward?
Yeah, they played good. I mean, I thought they were physical. I think they played a big part in kind of disrupting some of that stuff. I think there was definitely some luck a little bit. Taylor got beat twice up the sideline, and both passes just kind of one was dropped, the other one led the receiver out of bounds. But I think when you're looking at in a season as a whole, at some point those small samples even out. It's like in baseball, like when your batting average on balls in play is like 600, at some point it's going to fall back down to around 300, and some of those doubles are going to turn into outs. So there's some stuff that I think he needs to fix, but I think the early signs are really, really good. His competitiveness is crazy. He's
Mm.
sticky. He's a good athlete. He can move with guys. He kind of mirrored Devontae Adams on a lot of plays, and that's a guy that a lot of people can't do that with. So all those things are really good, but I do think that there's a handful of things that he needs to do better. We've seen him lose on 2 back shoulder throws, one to DeAndre Hopkins. He gave up one in this game, and then there was one to Cole late in the game that he got beat on, but the pass from Jarrett Stidham
Yeah.
wasn't accurate. He gets going a little bit too fast sometimes on curls, and he gave up one. It was pretty bad beat. I mean, so these are things that he needs to clean up. That I think as games go on, as you get more tape, teams are going to say, "Oh, this is what he does against the curl. Let's try him on that."
Right.
So I think that happens with every young player, though. There's a little bit of a race. You succeed. There's a race to fix things before they can exploit you on it. So, like anybody, I
Mhm.
think there's a handful of things they're going to try to coach into him this week. But overall, I think he looks really, really good. I'm excited about where he's going. I want to see what he ends up in his career, and I think he's man, he's succeeding kind of just on natural ability right now. So when
Right.
some of that stuff gets dialed in a little bit more, I think he's going to be even better.
Yeah, I mean, look, if opposing teams realize they can pick him apart with a bunch of curls, that's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, it's sort of like what Joe Burrow did against, was it Harris in the slot that whole game against when they played Cincinnati. But if that means you're giving up a lot of 10-yard or shorter passes, I mean, the one thing teams have tried and obviously thought they were going to have success in both of those games with DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams is the big deep shot, and the fact that he's held up there is the splash plays why he's getting so much attention. But that is the most important thing, especially for this defense that has given up so many big plays this year. The fact that he has held up on those, beautiful. He's earned the time to work
I,
on all the other stuff
I,
too.
th- I think where the concern comes is like on like if you're getting picked apart on curls and with the young players,
Yeah.
the adjustment then
Yeah.
make you susceptible to double moves, and now you're giving up big plays because you're sitting on the curl and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but I think he's going to be all right. I mean, the one thing I really do think he needs to fix quickly though is some of the tackling, like the open field tackling. He missed a couple. He had a couple huge tackles. It's a little boomer bust. Like just
Yeah.
dial it in a little bit.
Yeah.
And they got to figure out how to get him to play controlled without sacrificing energy. And these are good problems to have, though. Like
Yeah.
I think this issues you're trying to solve with him are very good problems. And look, when Marshawn came into the league, he had a lot of issues with zone coverage. You know what I mean? Like nobody comes into the league,
It does.
especially at cornerback, as a fully formed product. It's one of the hardest positions to play. So the fact that he's succeeding against the guys he's succeeding against is a very good thing. I don't want to sound like I'm being negative on him. Like I'm up on Alontae Taylor. It's just as you go through it, you see some of the stuff, and there are a couple things that I think that they're going to need to work on with him. Which if they didn't have to do that stuff,
Yeah.
he'd be Darrell Revis. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
just not that right
exactly.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. Why are you talking about tackling, Nick? Get into what you saw from Tyrann Mathieu this game too, because I know maybe in the past there were some tackling issues going on,
He looked dynamic in
with
this
him at
game.
times.
Yeah. Yeah, he looked good in this game. They've been trying to play him in the box more the last two. I thought he had a pretty good game against Arizona. He looked more active and involved in
Mm.
that game. But yeah, I thought he looked good. I think one of the things that they're going to be able to do when they get PJ Williams back is they'll be able to play PJ deep a little bit more. That'll allow Tyron to be in the box
Yeah.
even more than usual. And I think when you have him around the ball where he can make plays and he can be kind of dynamic and use his instincts, that's probably the best use of him as opposed to having him sitting back deep playing his deep zone.
Well, I was gonna bring up Tyron when Kevin was talking about ceiling, and he was making his point about the secondary and not knowing yet if the defense can be as good as it was last year because of all the changes they made at safety. The biggest question mark still for me for this team when it comes to finding out what their ceiling is is Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May. If this is just the beginning for those guys, and those guys can turn out to be special at safety, then the sky is the limit. The defense, I mean, everybody else on the defense is pretty much the same people except for the safeties. So if the safety play can be exceptional again, or very good at least, above average, with those two guys after they both had pretty quiet starts to the season, and I know May was dealing with injury, that could really help this team take off.
Look, they are
Yeah,
asked to
yeah.
do a lot. The safeties in this defense
Yeah.
are asked to do a lot. I think people forget how long it took Malcolm Jenkins to settle in when he first
2 stints.
when when he came back. He had a rough go of it for probably 5, 6, 7 games that year, and that was because he didn't know how to play cover 4, and it was new to
Cover
him.
4.
But yeah,
Yeah,
they
that's
do a
right.
lot of different stuff in this defense, and I think it just takes a little bit of time for him to settle in.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I always thought the Matthew signing was interesting because, gosh, this is a horrible analogy, but he feels like an icing player, right? Like the cake is baked, it's good, it's ready to go, and it's like you put this guy in the defense, and because the Saints, they run a really structured defense, in my opinion. Like DA wants his players to play the scheme, right? Do your job and be where you're supposed to be. And Matthew is guy. I think he's a little bit more of an instinct guy. So I thought the fit, they're bringing him on this defense was interesting, but I think I think within the confines of the defense, while everyone else is, if everyone else does their job and they continue, like if they stop the run and they can scheme against pass defense, I think then
I don't know if
Matthew.
I agree with you on that. I don't know if I agree with you on that because like
Yeah, I know you was going.
they let Kenny Vaccaro kind of play off of instinct a little bit. They let CJ play off of instinct a lot. They let Quan play off of instinct a little bit. I think that there's a little bit of room for that freelance, and within the structure of the defense, you got to be making plays though. But specifically, it safety and kind of in the box, I think they kind of let those guys. Von Bell
Yeah,
did a
and
little bit too. So I mean, I think they kind of like a guy that can play on a little bit of instinct and kind of break off of it a little bit. And Matthew even said this offseason the thing that attracted him to this scheme when he talked to DA was the freedom he was going to have within it. So I think they kind of want him to be able to go out there and do a lot of different
yeah,
things.
yeah, and the rest of the point I was going to make was that while if the rest of the guys are playing playing defense as they should, and like they're stopping the run and they can scheme the pass, and you don't have this leaky yardage, then I think a player like that becomes valuable to the defense. But I think if you have a guy that plays that style while the rest of the defense is leaky, I think it just exacerbates the problem. And I think it kind of makes it look, I don't want to say worse than what it is because it's bad, but I just think that, the rest of the defense has to be working for you to be able to capitalize on a guy like that. And I think through the first few weeks of the season, that wasn't the case. And I think it made him, I don't think it fit his style of play. That I guess that's how I was looking at it.
Kevin brought it home. He brought it home there. He brought that point home.
Moving on. I'll say this. Man, this is not a hot take, but Pete Werner is one of the most fundamental tackling football players I've ever seen in my life. Nick, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. Do you know how many missed tackles this guy's missed this year? I feel like it's like
he's had a few, but I mean, he's like in the wash. You know what I mean? Like it isn't the same as some of the other missed tackles that you see. And I think some of them a handful, or he has great range. He's covering up for other guys a little bit. So yeah, I mean, he's definitely missed a few. I think he's probably actually on the higher end of the team. Like if you were looking at it, but it's just the percentage wise, I think then it drops quite a bit because he is leading the NFL in tackles, I believe.
Yeah. I just see when he gets his hand on a guy, then the whistle's blown like 2 seconds later, and they're moving on to the next play. So, yeah. All right. So, let's close off here. This is a little bit of a fun topic. This is the Mike Triplett section of the pod. He came in and day one, Kevin, this is what I need you to do, and don't ask Nick about it. I'm putting my foot down, and I'm like, all right, Mike, you got this. So when you look at, and I put verses on here. I hate to do verses, but remember Drew's last year, right? And it was rough, right? He was hurt, and I think he was, some things going on. When you look at 2020 Drew and you look at current Rifle Mike, like how do you compare those two? Like what do you see, Mike?
I'm trying to remember.
Come on, Mike.
Give
me a hot take.
Yeah, that was the area. Well, here's
give me a hot
Drew
take, Mike.
All right, here's my Drew take is the last 2020 was the first was the worst of the four for sure. But I thought Drew's last 4 seasons as a group almost like cemented his legacy. Like like so many people were like, you can't throw it down the field. The guy can't throw it 30 yards. And I'm like, so what did Drew Brees do when he couldn't throw it 30 yards anymore? He had
Do it
his 4
5.
best completion percentage of his career. He had his 4 best passer ratings of his career, and he had his 4 best interception rates of his career. Drew Brees is like, if you make me play left-handed, I'll figure out how to play effectively left-handed. And so I think that's a fair bridge to Andy Dalton, which is during that 4-year stance. Now he also had a good run game and he had a good defense. The Saints figured out, well, here's the smartest way to play football. Let's have the best completion percentage. Let's set the NFL record for fewest turnovers in a season, which they did, or whatever it was that one year when they only had 8. Let's win time of possession. Let's have a run game. Let's have a defense. And that became their winning formula. I almost can't even remember what this team used to look like. There were years when Drew used to throw for over 5,000 yards, but also throw like 18, 20 interceptions in a season. It
Yeah.
was just so we're so conditioned to be like, and it worked with Teddy Bridgewater too. I think that's why we've had a hard time adjusting to what does Jameis Winston work. I think Dalton is getting this offense back to its roots. It's definitely more effective than the offense was in 20. I would still probably take 2020 Drew over Andy Dalton because I just know
It's Drew Brees.
It's Drew Brees.
It's Drew
and
Brees. Yeah,
he
you have to,
knows
right?
exactly
Yeah.
what to do. But they're running that style of offense again now, and it has given them more production over the last few years. There's no there should be no shame whatsoever in running this style offense.
How many
Yeah,
broken ribs? How many broken ribs did he have that season? Can I fix like half of them? Like in this hypothetical,
Oh,
can I have
man.
like half? Can I get like a half slab of ribs back on Brees and kind of see what happens? Yeah, I'm taking Drew. I mean, it's Drew Brees. They'll
You got
figure it
to.
out.
You
They
got
made the
to.
playoff. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
you got
just
to.
it's Drew Brees. Yeah.
Yeah, no question, Drew Brees. That was the real thing, and I didn't tell you guys about this part of the question, but if they, I was thinking right during this after the Raider game, and this is like way left field, but what's the difference between what Dalton is now and Foles the year that the Eagles won their Super Bowl, right? And I remember that, and I don't think there's, I don't, and so when I took a step back, and when I think of like, okay, why did they start?
An effective
Why did they go
defense
with?
is the difference between the two.
That's what I was about to say. They had a team that had a defense that could play. They had some weapons around that he can get the ball to, and the guy, he made the plays that were in front of him, and he protected the ball. And this is again, this is not a Super Bowl conversation, but I guess the thought here is that you can have a guy who doesn't have to be this All-Pro quarterback, and you can win in the NFL, right? And that wasn't that Super Bowl was like what 4 or 5 years ago, maybe or so. So in recent memory, there was a guy who most would could be considered a limited non-starting player who caught fire at the right time, and it turned out good. So I think when you look at this team and you take a step back and say, okay, what's the best case scenario? I'm again, I'm not saying Super Bowl. I'm saying, hey, play in that style that the Eagles played that year when Wentz got hurt, and then Foles came in and they played well. So I think that's what they're hoping for, and I think this game has kind of showed a little bit what they could be if they could really embrace that play style.
Kevin's got us winning the Super Bowl.
Oh man, listen,
That's
listen,
the
you're
ceiling.
gonna have my
That
mentions.
is the ceiling. Nick Foles, Jeff Hostetler. That's the ceiling.
Hey, no, the Saints got a ceiling, but we like Lil Wayne. We know ceilings here at NewOrleans.Football. So I was trying to get Nick to reference the mixtape earlier, but it's all good. So
I mean,
listen,
you're talking
guys,
about
go
the
sign up.
2020 this version of the Saints, man. There's a ceiling. There is we see the ceiling every week. You watching the game? There's a ceiling.
Man, look,
This
man.
isn't 18. This is 22, man.
Hey, look. Mike Triple and Nick on the Hill, DJ, and you guys don't have a ceiling. I do. So if you guys listen to this, go sign up, please. NewOrleans.Football /subscribe. Ton of information on the website. I mean, look at the studio that these guys are in. You got, Mike legs showing, Nick sitting back chilling, posters on the wall. We do it for you guys. So check us out, support us. If you're supporting us, thank you. Tell somebody, tell a friend to support us. We appreciate it. So you guys be good. The Saints play the Ravens next, and we'll see how that goes. We out.